Welcome to the Wimlex Show, episode number 44. This is Alex Graf, co-founder and co-CEO of Spryker Systems, the fastest growing e-commerce enterprise technology vendor in the market on a global level. Today, our guest is Acharya, the VP of e-commerce technology and product at DELL Technologies, a $90 billion company. We had a very interesting talk about moving from monoliths to microservices, how to manage such a very, very big transition, how to manage an IT organization with hundreds of developers, how to get in a modus where they don't invest in projects anymore, but rather are managed by OKRs. Super interesting learnings. Dell was always one of the leading companies when it was about selling directly to the customer, B2C and B2B, though their e-commerce infrastructure is super sophisticated and no vendor could so far convince Harsh and his team to use a standard software. So let's talk about why this was the case, what he has learned, and we will also hear about the future outlook of DELL Technologies when it comes to e-commerce. Harsh, welcome to the Wimlex Show. We're going to talk today about some IT myths and about Dell and your career and how you manage all the very interesting channels, B2B and B2C in this ecosystem. Before we dive into all these questions, please tell us who you are and what you're doing at Dell.
Great. Well, thank you very much, first of all, for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here and be talking to you. My name is Acharya, like you said, and I have been with Dell for about 13 years now, close to 13 years. And I started my journey with Dell straight out of school as a software engineer, managing product data management systems for Dell. And when I first joined, I never knew I was going to stay here for this long, right? As your first starting job, you learn some things and then you move on. But I was blessed with fantastic leaders and fantastic opportunities. And I got my way into e-commerce in 2010. And then for the next 10 years, I got to work on some really great e-commerce products, both on B2B and B2C sides. Everything from shopping experience and checkout experience to personalization, loyalty, Black Friday, everything in between. And you know, my interest for e-commerce experiences and engineering and tricks and tips and tactics and architecture just kept growing over the period of time. And 5 years into my foray into e-commerce, I got to lead product management teams for Dell.com. And then 3 years from then, I got an opportunity to run engineering and product both. And now I run product engineering and site reliability for both B2C and B2B Dell.com experiences.
When I worked like about 10 years ago at a very big retailer in Germany, the Otto Group, I had to prepare a lot of competitive analysis, and there we had like lists of like biggest e-commerce vendors worldwide. And always part of those lists was Dell. And when we had to explain what is kind of the USP, the business model, back then it was, okay, Dell is like an IT provider, like a hardware provider, and it differentiates from other vendors by selling directly. So no wholesale in between, therefore, and you can kind of customize your device. So it was still a very laptop and desktop based world back then when we did the analysis. So was it true? So was our assessment true, and is it still the USP today?
Absolutely. Michael Dell wrote actually a book called Direct from Dell more than a decade ago, and that's been our way of getting in front of our customers to sell them direct. And it started with Dell being the first one, not only allowing customers to buy directly from the company, but also allowing them to configure and build their own machines on our website. That's how, our e-commerce website came along in early 90s. So absolutely, we love having that direct relationship with customers, not only from a standpoint of selling it to them, but it allows us to know our customers really well because we are able to understand what works for them, what does not work for them, and it allows us to continue improving our experience to tailor the needs.
Is wholesale part of your business? So can I buy a Dell computer at a Walmart or at a consumer electronics store in Germany?
We do have retail presence across the globe, especially in regions where retail is still very prominent. Some of the European countries, as well as Japan, as you know, is a large brick and mortar retail environment. So we do have strategic partnerships with retailers, and yes, you can go and buy Dell products from those retail stores, and we kind of selectively decide what works in that retail environment, and we let you pick from those in those stores. So yes, we do sell via retail brick and mortar stores as well.
So when I looked up the numbers correctly, we're talking about a company with like roughly 90 billion in revenue, 90 billion plus. Is this still correct?
That is still correct. Yes.
Yeah. And what part of this 90 billion is sold directly to consumers, B2B and B2B, B2C and B2B?
I don't believe we make those numbers publicly available, and so no? I don't know whether I can share.
I didn't know. I don't want to trick you here into stuff.
I don't think
want to talk about.
But just to kind of put it in perspective, entire Dell PC and servers and storage business is kind of split into two kinds of businesses. One is called CSG, which is Client Solution Group, which is all about selling products that our end users use, like people like you and me, whether it's in business setting or consumer setting. And then we have ISG, which is our Infrastructure Solution Group, which is all about server storage networking. A big part of it came with EMC as part of EMC acquisition, and then we got VMware, 80% stake in VMware as part of that as well. And what you see is that when it comes to PCs and servers, laptops, desktops, servers, workstations, you see a lot more direct business than indirect. But then when you go to storage, where you need a lot more customization, people have to understand the current environment of the data centers. There are, at times system integrators involved, so you see more indirect there than direct. But really, it varies from region to region based on which regions we were already present in for a long time, which regions we entered later, and really the culture in those regions, which varies. Like I said, Japan is a great example where brick and mortar retail, at least before COVID, was extremely prominent, and you see retail stores of the size of parking lots in Japan. So it really depends on the region.
It also changes. So
yes.
You're saying that Dell started direct selling in the 90s. You joined, when I looked up correctly, in 2008. So what did the direct selling infrastructure look like in 2008? That was already a time when e-commerce was very big in the US and in Europe. We had a lot of very established standard vendors around, like Hybris, now SAP, Oracle, ATG, IBM, WebSphere. So and I guess like over the decade before you joined, all those vendors knocked at Dell's door and say you should use us, sell via WebSphere. So how did the infrastructure look like, and how did this discussion go when you started working there?
Great question. It takes me down the memory lane. So first of all, Dell actually started selling direct in 80s when the company started. We started selling directly online in early 90s, but we always had the offline, direct business where you can call into the call center and buy something. When I joined Dell in 2008, we were just about getting to a point where we had regional e-commerce platforms. So we had homegrown platforms in North America, but in Europe and APJ, we had a vendor called Smarts and eSmarts. They don't exist anymore, but we were using their platform and infrastructure to run our online business when I first joined in 2008. But we were always a big part homegrown, mainly because of our configure to build model, right? Because even then in 90s, when this WebSpheres and Hybrises of the world were popping up, no one had really gotten to a point where they can allow customers to go and configure everything from scratch and then build it in a way that the bill of materials can go to the factory. Because when we started selling direct online, we were in just-in-time build model. You were not just coming and buying SKUs online, right? It was not built to stock. So
that's true. So you started with the hardest part in e-commerce, with the configurator. Yeah.
Yes, and it's not just configurator, which allows you to customize things that are already in warehouse. This was configurator that had to make sure that the parts are available in the factories, not warehouses, in factories. So when everything comes together, not only everything is compatible and the machine makes sense, but all the validations rules have run, and we can actually build that machine with the parts that we have. So it was a pretty tight, coupling with underlying supply chain and, compatibility of different parts and the pricing and the cost of parts. So we started with the most difficult part of the puzzle. And that was our USP, and that's what got people excited, that I can go to Dell and I can build whatever I want to build.
And is it still the case today, or is it rather people buy stuff that are off the shelf?
So we see both. For entry-level products, we see people, buying what we have stocked. They just choose from good, better, best options. But as you go into higher-end businesses, and gamers is our pretty big and important persona, they like to build their own. And so the model we kind of use is to look at the demand profile in every region and see if we can come up with an 80-20 or 60-40 approach, depending on the region, where certain things we can just build and stock, and some things that we allow customers to build. If you think about it, it is no different than the smartphone wave that we went through. When smartphone first came about, the underlying applications were advancing so fast that smartphones had to continue improving itself from an OS and hardware and memory standpoint to keep up with the demand of those applications. And then people were buying new smartphones every year. And then now it has gotten to a point where, I've been using my iPhone for 3 years now without any issues, right? And so PCs kind of went to the exact same phenomenon in 90s and early 2000s.
What kind of model are you using? Is it a configurated model, or it's like just a best offer kind of thing we are using right now for this podcast?
So I have two machines. The one that I use for my personal use, it's an XPS, which is one of our most premium products. I actually went and built it on my own. But the one that I use for work is a Latitude, which we have a standard configuration that we get to pick from, which is actually the parts of which are picked based on the user profile, which works really well for me. It's a perfectly sized laptop that allows me to travel around the globe, and I was able to before COVID. And at the same time, it has the right amount of power. So I have a one that was built to stock, and I have another one that I built it on my own.
So when you joined then in 2008, and I guess you've back then Dell kind of figured out the whole configurator business. Something actually lots of e-commerce retailers today don't know how to deal with. It's still like the most complicated project they're working on. So can you lead us a little bit like through the development then after 2008? So what kind of like big projects have you been then involved? Because like configuration and B2B and B2C was already solved, so everything was kind of done. So, but they still needed you, right?
Yeah. So I think if you think about the journey, when I moved into e-commerce organization in 2010, there were two things that were going on. One was we had just replaced the third-party systems in EMEA and APJ. And we now had a global online code base, a single code base that served the entire world. But there were two things that we started doing. One was our entire e-commerce platform and experiences were built in 90s, and they were built on a homegrown content management system, which from an availability and resiliency standpoint were great, but they were essentially people setting up XML files and pushing them to the server and then rendering their experiences. And similarly, our card and checkout and everything, they were not really service-oriented architecture based. There were feeds running all over the places. So the first thing we started doing in 2010 is to kind of move away from the pub sub and feed driven model to service oriented architecture, to go to web services. But at the same time, right about when we started that, smartphones came about. So we had to kind of create two
That's
parallel
true.
paths.
Yeah,
Parallel paths, and we said, okay, not only we need to move from legacy architecture to service oriented architecture, but we also need to start pivoting towards building responsive web experiences. And so those are the two things we kind of got started on in parallel, B2B and B2C both. And then we also, tried our hands on mobile apps back then, which again, we were able to build some fantastic mobile apps. It's just that, the way our business model is and the kind of products that we sell, people don't buy those every single day, right? You don't need a PC every day. So we realized very quickly that while mobile apps, we can build some really great mobile apps, unless we decide to be a marketplace like Amazon or eBay, which we are not. That it didn't make sense to stay in the mobile app space. So that's what
Can we stay with this question for a little time? Because this kind of discussion took retailers kind of 4 or 5 years. So it was not mobile apps. It was like rather, should we focus on iOS or on Android? Should we go with a hybrid app or a native app? Should we go with a responsive setup? So it took them years.
Yes.
So, and how long was this kind of discussion? So now it seems clear and it sounds easy, but what was the reality then?
So we knew about our buying cycle already. So we knew that we needed a responsive website, period, because we still were getting, when you are in the business of selling PCs, you need to have a great mobile experience, but you need to have a great desktop experience because you are in the business selling desktop. So we didn't really have to spend a lot of time debating between responsive web versus mobile apps. We knew that we needed a responsive website, regardless. So we got started on responsive web. I think it's the mobile app where we spent quite a bit of time figuring out whether we should invest in it or not. And we really started when we decided to kind of try it out just to see if we can drive some kind of, different kind of traction and start, running deals there and start selling a lot more electronics and peripherals. We tried our hands on both iOS and Android, but we tried it in like smaller markets like Australia and New Zealand, right? Because we did a lot more complicated things in North America where configurations were allowed at nth degree level, and some of those things were more difficult to do on apps back then. And in Australia and New Zealand, it was a playing field where we can do that with much lower risk. And so for us, the decision of responsive web was not very difficult. That was a go-do, no regret initiative. But mobile apps is something we kind of debated, and then we tried out in ANZ, and then we eventually decided that we didn't need it, at least for commerce purposes. We still have mobile apps out there that are for support function, services function, things, after point of sale, where people need it a lot more frequently and often. But not for e-commerce.
Okay, then I would like to reframe my question, because the other big question was in 2008, 2009, how important will mobile be? And especially in your product niche, that is kind of it's kind of an investment product category. It's not just something you just consume. There was like, at least until 2013, 14, always like to think, okay, that is a product nobody needs like a mobile website for, because when you like decide for PC or laptop, you need like a big screen and you select the product only like once in 2 to 3 years. So who the fuck will like configure a product like this in a mobile environment? So Harsho, go away with your mobile resources request here. Nobody needs it.
No, you are absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So we did not really. We were definitely skeptical, like you said, in 2008. And so we didn't really start seriously looking into responsive web until, I would say, early 2011. And that was really based on the penetration we saw with iOS, right? It's like it was moving so fast. So what we saw was that our traffic from mobile was increasing more rapidly than we thought it would. We were still skeptical about conversion on mobile because it's a very high average order value product, right? And while by that time we were already selling build to stock and configuration was optional, you could actually buy things and get it tomorrow. By then we were already there. We still were skeptical about conversion on mobile, given that back then average product value for consumer PCs was still like about $1,000 or $1,200, and so what got us was that we decided that the mobile play is not just about conversion, but it's about being where our customers are, right? So we kind of thought about it a different way, where let's not just decide our investment strategy on mobile based on what our conversion would look like on mobile, but the fact that our customers, when they are riding on a bus, sitting next to someone in a car, commuting in a school, they are going to Dell.com on their phone. And while they may not actually pull the trigger, because even back then, like buying something $1,000 plus on mobile was not a common thing, right? It has become a lot more mainstream now than it was then. And so we said, look, we may not be able to convert people as much on mobile, but if we can get consideration done on mobile, we can give the best experience on mobile where people can decide what they want to buy, and then they come back home and make the actual purchase on desktop. That's still a win, right? And so we really changed our focus from just being conversion driven to being where our customers are. And that was the decision point where we said, look, we have to invest in mobile purely from a standpoint of being where our customers are.
And for today, it's still true that you don't have an app which I can download and then configure on my PC. So it's rather a native mobile experience. Yeah,
we don't have mobile apps from a commerce standpoint, but we do have a responsive website. So when you go to Dell.com on your phone, you get a mobile-friendly experience, which is also adaptive. So we don't simply just squeeze the experience to show you the same page on a smaller footprint. We actually make it more adaptive. So a product details page on desktop web is one page. On mobile, it's more progressive disclosure based, and with functions that can easily help you navigate through the experience.
And did this experience kind of enhanced your B2B buying experience today? So all the stuff we've discussed so far it's kind of very end user driven.
Yes.
Because I don't think like in 2008 or even like 2009, lots of B2B procurement or purchasing managers used the mobile version of Dell to decide for the next infrastructure project, right?
No, that's a great point. So no, we only invested in responsive web for B2C. B2B, to your point, people from a B2B standpoint were shopping and purchasing things for their work needs, and so they were always in their office settings and they always had large monitors. And so we haven't really invested in mobile experience from a B2B standpoint. However, as millennials and Gen Z generation starts becoming procurement leaders, we are seeing the shift. It's still a huge percentage disproportionately desktop driven traffic that we see. But what we realized is that regardless of desktop or mobile, our B2B customers are now looking for the same level of ease of use, accessibility, and consumer-like experience. It's really consumerization of B2B commerce experience. So the way we are now approaching it is that let's just start blurring the boundary between B2B and B2C. Let's not think about them as two separate experiences or platforms. We really need one core commerce experience, and we just need to overlay B2B capabilities on top. And that's where we are headed now, so that we are not going and building B2B and procurement specific mobile experiences. We just have one core experience, and B2B is just overlay capabilities on top.
Okay, let's stay on the device question for a minute, because I started to write an article yesterday, and Chris criticized it already. Which had the title desktop seems to be the next brick and mortar. So in retail, we saw that most retailers that had this kind of brick and mortar focus in their DNA, they never made the shift into e-commerce. They just didn't get it. For them, e-commerce was just the cost center. And what we are now seeing at retailers, B2B, B2C, the different business models. So people that do have now a team with like 10, 20 years e-commerce experience that started like with desktop, that they cannot like shift into the mobile world. We see it, for example, at Amazon. So Amazon really sucks at like mobile experience. They try to buy stuff and integrate it in the app, and the app is getting more complicated like every month. And then they're looking at Wish right now, I guess, because Wish is going to IPO in the next week. And I'm 100% sure we're going to see like a Wish kind of product feed in the Amazon app. So, but there's no. This kind of transition seems to be very, very hard. So I understand that you kind of mastered the desktop game. So, but aren't you afraid that do you have the right resources and approach to tackle this not only millennial question, but I don't know what the group is called after the millennials, but the even younger people now that
Gen Z,
they don't want to configure. They don't want to configure anymore. It's kind of this kind of slider feed. So the whole configuration thing changes.
Yeah, so what we see is purely from a configuration and non-configuration standpoint, we actually see both, even with the latest generation, because like I said, there are a lot of gamers out there. And believe it or not, gamers still want to go through their own configuration and they don't want to just buy something off the shelf. But you are right, majority of students and people who just want to get something tomorrow, they just want to pick something up from the stock. But you are right, the whole transition from desktop to responsive web was not easy. It was very difficult. And the reason it was difficult was that you must have heard everywhere that we need to be mobile first experience or mobile first company. The reality is that when you are going from a desktop driven experience to now enabling responsive web, where let's say 80% of your business is still coming from desktop experiences, it is very difficult to come to the terms with just focus on minimum viable product from a mobile experience standpoint and then expand it to desktop, because that could impact your conversion on desktop because you have a lot more real estate space. That's where majority of traffic is going. So we did struggle quite a bit initially when we were making that move, where we really wanted to be mobile first to build the best in class mobile experience, but we kind of had to keep pulling ourselves back because we had to find that delicate balance between building a fantastic mobile experience, but at the same time not losing existing traffic and conversion that we had on desktop. And we had to instead of just doing mobile first, we had to say that it's desktop first, but extremely mobile friendly. Yeah, mobile cannot be an afterthought. And secondly, let's make sure that we are making it adaptive. And what adaptive allowed us to do was that we did not really have to start with mobile and then give the desktop experience that was just a larger footprint of mobile. We were able to have a fantastic desktop experience where we still had majority of our traffic, but on mobile we said that we are not only going to have responsive, where we are going to make device type driven changes so that it is adaptive, so it can also be a really great mobile experience. So it was very tough. And it took us a while to get to a point where our new experience was able to perform at the same level as the old experience as we were running all the A/B tests. And so it took us, a few years to get to 100% of traffic going to a new responsive web architecture, as opposed to, even though the experience was ready, rather quickly, it took us a few years to truly take traffic to all the new platform.
Okay, and let's assume the shift we are seeing right now is as radical as like the first shift from desktop to mobile. Now we're seeing the shift like in buying. Nobody is going to use filters anymore. So we are like, I usually say we are like the last filter generation. The website was like 50% on the screen you see is like a filter, like a size, price, brand, color. So it's like it's kind of destroying the whole experience. So let's assume for a moment this kind of Wish experience or WeChat experience that's going to move into this sector here of buying PCs and laptops. Would you then still do the same trick, I would say, which you did like in 2008 and say, okay, let's go to Australia or another market, which is not so important, where we can set up like an independent team, though they can start thinking or they can start working with a blank on a blank sheet instead of like working in the existing infrastructure?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we are just going through a complete redesign, and we are using Australia and New Zealand as our playing ground to try new things out and doing radical changes on the website to not just be a marketplace like experience where you are just trying to sell things. And if you go back to Wayback Machine, and you see Dell.com experience 9 months ago versus now, you would see a radical shift in how we talk to our customers, and not just leading them straight into some kind of a deal or sales. And yes, we did the same thing. When you have a large business that is e-commerce based, your risk profile changes a little, and you cannot take major risks in major regions to start with. You need to start small, but then build it in a way where scaling it out to the rest of the world should be really fast. And so I actually was in Sydney right before the lockdown happened in March, and we planned out how we are going to make the redesign tested in Australia and then New Zealand, and we still we still put a small team out there and test out radically different experiences, and see how they perform there in that market. It's English-speaking market as well, so it kind of helps us, drive some kind of parallels with some of the European countries like the UK and Ireland and North America. But we do see, variation based on culture in our results. But it's a pretty good way of testing things. And then once we have tested it out in Australia and New Zealand, then we, do a small test in North America, and then we just, expand it to other regions. There are some nuances in countries like China and Japan where we have to do a lot more testing and do some variations, but for the most part, we have been fortunate with using ANZ as a test bed and expanding elsewhere. Canada is another country that we use for our testing for some of these large radical changes.
Yeah. So when you would ask like a German manufacturer, usually they say they test it in Austria or Switzerland. Yeah. So that's our Belgium. That's our small markets where we can test. Yeah. So when I talk to retailer or retail e-commerce managers and like discussing this kind of shift, like in channels, and it's getting more and more important, we say, okay, most of the old retailers are coming from a world where IT departments were always seen as a cost center. So they were not like the main driver of the business. They were not helping with creating the USP. And then we say, okay, that is like different. So the management now has to ask, not to ask, okay, please, Harsh, give me like 3 options. I will choose the option with the best chance risk profile. That's what actually managers are mitigating risks. In a new world, we say, okay, they have to turn it around. They have to ask, okay, Harsh, you have presented me like 10 ideas. So what is the problem? Why haven't we tested them out already? What kind of money do you need? What kind of more power do you need? That is kind of the modern form of running a business like Dell. So you don't need to finger point to anybody here, right, from the management. But how is like Dell looking at IT investments, describe and seeing this kind of polls here I've described?
Yeah. So what you said initially is what exactly it looked like a decade ago, where it was a cost center, and we would go and decide some large projects, and they run for 3 years, and you don't see any results until then, and then you have budget creeps and scope creeps. And we have truly changed in the past 5 years, where we have turned our entire digital organization, and when I say digital, not just e-commerce, including our IT applications that support supply chain and corporate and everything, to be outcome driven. And it really started post our acquisition of EMC. We got this company called Pivotal, which was really a leader in helping drive human-centric design-driven development methodology. And so the way my organization works now with the e-commerce management organization or business organization is that instead of creating these massive projects that run for 6 months or a year or 3 years, we have broken down our e-commerce experience in a set of product lines and products, just like you would do with the product you are selling, right? So my shopping experience is broken down into Explore, and Explore is where you are exploring the products. Discover is everything about discovering the products, and even though we don't like filtering as much as we did before, people still filter. results and search results is part of
Yeah,
Discover.
that's only because you offer the filter option.
I know.
We both are like from the desktop world. We always and I guess you have also backgrounds in SEO, SEA. So that's
Yes.
where that we think in like conversion optimization, filters, how we can show. That's so we are the legacy here.
Yes. No, I get it. Then we had configure and product, and then in checkout we had cart and checkout and payment, and so we broke things down into product lines and products, where homepage is a product of explore product line. And the way we then started working with our e-commerce management organization is that we are not going to invest in projects anymore, but we are going to set objectives and key results for each of these products, OKRs. And OKRs are going to be defined by a balanced team of a product manager, designer, a set of engineers, and the business owner of that product. And they are really going to then tell us how much investment we need to hit those OKRs. And we started making investment decisions at product level, and they can actually get more investment 6 months down the line if they are hitting their objectives and key results. So for example, our homepage team created objectives and key results that included things like increasing SEO traffic or reducing bounce rate, reducing exit rate. And they set those goals for 6 months, right? And we gave them one balanced team of 6 engineers, a product manager and designer. And if they are doing really well as a team, then we increase the number of engineers that product can have. And so we really turned this into like a real product model versus a bunch of projects, so that we can truly make it customer outcome driven. So every product is now focused on driving customer satisfaction up, conversion up, reducing bounce rate, exit rate. They can define their own. But we also did not want to miss out on the end-to-end experience, because when you do this, you can do really well in silos, but you need to make sure that the end-to-end experience is not impacted. So we have a set of cross-product leads and cross-product designers who ensure that as these teams work on their objectives and key results for their products and product lines, we are not missing out on the end-to-end experience and journey. And then third thing we do is, while doing all these things, we still run some enterprise-wide initiatives that are really bigger than the bread box. Things like enabling a much better availability information about our products. That requires work across the board. Things like, if we are ever having to do buy online, pick up in store, which we don't do yet because we don't have as much retail business as some other players. But if we have to do some of those things, those run across product lines and products, and then we still kind of put those initiatives and their stories and features into the backlog of these product lines and products. But what really made us not be a cost center and be a profit center and be really customer outcome driven versus project and output driven is when we created this product line and products, and when we said we are no longer going to measure ourselves based on number of features that we launched. We are really going to measure ourselves on whether we hit the KPIs and objectives and key results that we have defined for ourselves. And that took us about 3 years to get to.
Crazy. But there might be projects that are very hard, like to create or to formulate like the key results today on. So to be really innovative, and that's a problem with like that might be a new channel you try to adapt, like Instagram or so. You have to try out new stuff. So we started to advise some companies like a couple of years ago to say you have to keep 5%, 10% of your investment budget and take it out of the risk management structure. You say your risk management structure is now OKRs, which is fine, but you still need this kind of structure where there's no return on invest attached to, because otherwise you cannot innovate anymore. So how do you do it?
Absolutely. So it's exactly that. We have this. It's a similar phenomena where we have this concept of left to right and right to left. So like you said, majority of our investment is in left to right. How do we incrementally improve our experience? But we have some budget, set aside. We have not set, exact percentage, for it. But we do set budget aside for right to left, which is really more radical things that we want to do, more blue sky, greenfield experiments, which we would not otherwise go after. Things like, testing out an app in Alexa, right? We know that building an Alexa app is not necessarily going to, drive 100 millions in revenue for us in the next year, but that's something we have to, try our hands on. Trying out a new way of having our experience. Like we are actually experimenting our new franchise experience in Australia, where you can see our franchise page for, let's say, XPS products without filters, to your point. There are no filters in there, right? And so, yes, we do put, set budgets aside to do more right to left radical changes. But, percentage of that budget varies really based on the overall pie. Like any other company and business, you need to look at your overall pie and decide how much you are comfortable with. But that's absolutely needed, because incremental changes can help you, feel like you are making tremendous progress in terms of conversion, but it would only take one disruptor to come in and do something so radically different, like Uber and Lyft did, or Airbnb did, that could, truly catch you off guard. And so you have to make sure that you are doing both left to right and right to left.
Okay, and maybe you've answered this question already by explaining how you manage your teams. But when we talked before this podcast, I already asked you this question. So IT seems to be a little bit more chaotic than business. Something I didn't realize before starting a software company. So how do you manage then all the different IT requests where people come to you and saying, Harsh, there's this new technology, MongoDB. I know we have a lot of SQL, but as SQL stuff was always so hard, and MongoDB with this kind of data lake ideas will solve it all. We have to do it. I'm 100% sure it solves it. How, and there's this kind of MongoDB phenomena is like happening every week in IT. I guess so. How do you manage this?
So this happened probably about 3-4 years ago, where our engineering teams were really passionate about breaking our monoliths down into microservices, being on cloud native architecture, rewriting our apps in more server side HTML or into SPA when it comes to our account management and card and checkout apps. And when I was a product leader, I used to push back on those kinds of things, because those kinds of things meant that I would get less in terms of new features and capabilities. When I took over engineering, just like yourself, you started getting your feet wet into technology world, I realized quickly that by continuously focusing only on new features and functionalities, while we were gaining share and we were gaining, better conversion, from a long-term standpoint, we were crippling ourselves, because we were putting a lot more tech debt. We were going slower than before, because now we had even larger code base that you can't really, launch every day on. We were impacting quality and we were impacting availability. No. And so when I became an engineering and product leader, I had to take a step back and ask myself, how do I find the right balance? And the way I was able to find the right balance, and thanks to having done product before and now jumping into engineering, was I went and had an open conversation with my engineering leaders and said, look, now I understand how wrong I was when I thought about this product just as a way to launch new features and functionalities. But the only way we can actually keep investing in everything we want to do, whether it's microservice-based architecture, moving from SQL to Cassandra or Mongo or Kafka from RabbitMQ, if we can tie some really measurable customer and business objectives to these things. So like, hey, how are we going to do this? This is just the infrastructure swap. Like, well, no, there has to be something. So let's say we are going from our monolith to VMware Tanzu-based microservice-based architecture. Can you increase the page speed by doing that? It's like, yeah, absolutely. I'm like, okay, that's, if you increase page speed, it increases conversion. And by the way, now Google, from an SEO standpoint, looks at page speed as one of the most important things. So let's write it down. Are you going to be able to improve SEO? Absolutely, right? You're going to be able to do that. If our pages, become faster, is our conversion going to go up? Okay, perfect. And then I pulled my product leaders in and say, hey, you guys know, when we increased the page speed or reduce the page load time by X percentage, whatever conversion went up by, like, yeah, we have that data. Like, they love data, right? Product managers. And so, yes. Like, okay, perfect. And then we went to the requesters and business saying that, hey, look, if we truly become outcome driven versus, features and functionality driven, I have this proposition for you where I will help you gain the same amount of conversion you are planning on gaining in the next 6 months, by using a different set of tactics than new features. You would still be able to see the conversion lift. However, you will also be able to see much faster speed of delivery 6 months down the line, right? And initially they were hesitant, like, we don't buy this, right? We said, okay, we absolutely need to prove ourselves before you actually, start believing in it. So instead of boiling the ocean and trying to do this for the entire Dell.com experience, let's take one small part of the puzzle. Let's just take configurator, and let's take our personalization platform, and let's just try this out there. And what they saw was that our configurator experience improved in terms of performance and page load time by more than 40%. The conversion went up. Customers were happier. Our CSAT went up. And now our configurator team was no longer relying on the larger monolith, where 200 developers decide together when to launch and orchestrate it and all.
Yeah,
and they're like,
usually what we're seeing that 80% of the time developers have their sitting in conferences discussing what to do and not developing stuff. Yes.
Right. And so then our business partners were like, wow, not only we were able to achieve our outcomes, you guys are now launching every day. And that experiment required us to, build that relationship and partnership and trust with our business partners. But the next thing we know is next time we had to do some new things, our business partners would actually come themselves and say, hey, can we move it to our cloud native platform? Even though they don't know exactly what cloud native means in terms of the actual underlying technology, they started coming to us and saying that, hey, I want to do cloud native first, and then I want to build new features. So it really took us about a year and a half to 2 years to socialize it, evangelize it, convince it, look at it from an outcome standpoint. And now my engineering leaders know that when they come to me with a new request, like, going from RabbitMQ to Kafka, they have to come with a customer outcome driven, or it could be like for RabbitMQ to Kafka, the proposition that they brought to me was that, today it takes us, X amount of time to update pricing across all of these countries, 130 plus countries we do business in, and we can bring it down to 5 minutes. Like, okay.
So you say before this kind of a change in the infrastructure, this like native clouds or whatever it means, like in specific terms, you were like in the same situation, like lots of retailers today. I know a couple of companies that say, okay, we don't need to put new items on the requirement list for IT because like internally in the team, it's we tell it's like a graveyard of ideas because you put them on and then they're going to die. So nobody's going to deliver them because of the infrastructure stuff. But we see like a similar development in companies that tried out this kind of microservice approach because they pushed it really hard and said, okay, let's break up the monolith. Let's like build the team from Hash takes over PIM and he can decide Java versus PHP, whatever. And then we only have to meet during like launch process where we had to decide what kind of process pulls data from where and who's responsible for what. And what we saw there in those replatforming projects is that they only combine the disadvantages of both worlds, the disadvantages from the microservice world and from the monolith world. So it was kind of distributed monoliths.
Yes. Distributed monolith is not a myth. It's a reality. Distributed monolith is reality. And look, every company that goes from monolith to microservices based architecture has to go through some level of distributed monolith phenomena. Fortunately, we recognize that, pretty early on in the process. And while I would say that, we still have distributed monoliths because of that structure, one thing we kind of started doing was we started moving from orchestration driven model to choreography driven model. So in orchestration driven, microservice based architecture, you are still going through a string of microservices. So you are still kind of relying on, every service to do its job in someone like is running orchestra. But choreography is where you can truly make your customer facing experience an island, and you have a broker, and broker does everything. And so you're really, choreographing versus orchestrating. and that's where we took our shopping experience. So our shopping experience, when we re-platformed it, we realized that we were going down this path, and so we kind of started driving a shift where instead of having distributed monoliths where my shopping experience still calls 20 different services to get data, and it actually has its own broker that choreographs, so we don't have to live in that world, but we still have distributed monoliths out there. They are still better than the past because they are loosely coupled, but we need to get to a point where everything is truly choreography driven, but it's truly decoupled from each other.
But would you agree to the following statement? So I 100% get that you are able to manage it, and maybe we can spend the last minutes by get a little bit better understanding of your team setup. So how many teams and how you orchestrate them. But we saw this kind of monolith to microservice movement with teams with 10 developers, where there was no microservice architect. So in overall, it's still a resource you don't find at every corner. And smaller teams that were still managed like a cost center. We never saw like a positive outcome. So that did not have the time. They did not have the competences to split up like 10 developers in like 5 microservice teams without the orchestration, and it takes a lot of time. So sometimes 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, and as you said, so you're still in between in the transformation process. Though that is, I would not recommend such a monolith to microservice move in companies with less than a couple of dozen developers or people that really understand the infrastructure impacts of microservices. So would you agree or disagree?
You are absolutely right. The thinking that if you move from monolith to microservice you need fewer engineers is a myth, right? Moving from monolith to microservices based architecture does not need less or fewer engineers. In fact, in some cases, you may need more engineers than you did before because now you're having to orchestrate. However, it increases the availability, quality of service, and speed of delivery.
Yeah. The output per developer increases.
It increases, right? But you need more people. Yeah. What I would say is that when you decide to go from monolith to microservices, what we learned from our first experience, a decade ago, which we did not repeat in our latest transformation, is that do not get into the trap of wanting to move the entire ecosystem from monolith to microservices at the same time. Because that is going to become a multi-year project where you are not going to be able to deliver any new value to your customers or your business. And so the way we approached it is we actually said that we are only taking homepage and we are only moving homepage to a micro app. And we continued development of new features and functionalities on our monolith while homepage was being taken out. Then we took the category path. Then we took the franchise page. It means we did not completely shut down the business and the customer outcomes, but did it in silos. But you are absolutely right. If you are a 12 people e-commerce team and you have a complex monolithic architecture, going from monolith to microservices-based architecture, you should only do it if you are committed to putting more people, more engineers to actually nurture that architecture.
Yeah, and we see it now with some dying retailers that don't have any time, and now the CEOs understand, okay, brick and mortar is kind of dying. Click and collect won't do the trick. We have to invest more in e-commerce, and then as we know that, let's reinvent the platform within the next 6 months. So that's actually nobody's going to be happy with those.
No,
projects.
you can't do that in 6 months, right?
Can you give us some insight, because you're running such a big platform? So about some insights about your team structure. So I understood you're managing not a little bit more than a dozen people. So how many are there, and how many are working like on the existing website, mobile app, versus like how many are working like on really new stuff?
Yeah. So like I said, we have broken down our experiences into product lines and products.
Yes.
Right? I mentioned it earlier, explore and discover and configure, and each of them have products like homepage, configurator, product details page. Those are products. And so the way my organization is structured is with single threaded ownership of each of one or more product lines under each of my leaders. So we have about 600 full-time engineers, and then we do hire contingent contractors based on the surge needs that we have. But really, from a structure standpoint, we try not to move around our engineers from product to product and product lines to product. We don't treat them like they're a pool of resources that we move around. And I have two engineering leaders. One engineering leader owns our upper funnel experiences like shopping and learn. Another engineering leader owns our bottom of the funnel experiences. And then I have two product management leaders. And under each of the engineering leader, we have engineering managers who own multiple product lines. And then each of those managers have leaders who own their products, right? So each leader then owns multiple products. The way we allocate capacity is that every product line, like Explore, Discover, Configure, and Product, they have set product capacity that just allows them to keep the business running, compliance, keeping the lights on, making sure you're maintaining your databases and all those things. And then for doing new things, depending on their OKR and how much investment we want to make in those areas, we put additional investment in those teams. And that investment is the one that varies from year to year, depending on where we want to invest. We want to do a lot more payment types this year and new digital wallets, and the payment engineering team would get more capacity than before. But everyone gets some set capacity that they are going to keep forever. As long as the website is going to be out there to just keep the lights on, and then additional capacity on top. That's how we are structured. Our structure looked very different in the past, where we would just move people around, and what we realized was that when you are moving everyone around, including engineering leads, people treat their code base like a hotel and not a house, right? And when you actually start making a more long-term investment in your product and product lines, and people start treating it like their home, and they invest a lot more in it. The other big change we made was that we used to have this notion of level 1 support and level 2 support and level 3 support. What it meant was that if something broke in production, it would go to those frontline teams first. We kind of took that out and said, the single-threaded engineering teams for each product are going to be responsible for building, maintaining, and supporting the product. And that was a shift that took about a year. But what it did was that now the engineers who are building the product are responsible for supporting it. It means that they automatically became a lot more responsible and accountable when they were building the code, because they knew that now they will have to get a call at midnight. So we turned the existing support organization into a true SRE practice, site reliability engineering. And their job is to actually have instrumentation, monitoring, observability, automation, self-healing, all the way from experience to the infra, to storage, server, networking. So we kind of kept the site reliability engineering function, but that went vertically all the way to the infra. But the actual application, support now, rests within the engineering team, so that they just have supported. And we did the similar thing with quality and testing organization, where we no longer rely on a dedicated testing organization to test code. Testing and QA is now the responsibility of the same balance teams that build the code. We have a thin layer of testing organization that does end-to-end validation all the way to fulfillment, but the actual product testing resides within the product engineering organization.
Cool. Maybe I forgot one question. I think when it comes to IT challenges, you have seen them all over the last 12 years. And actually, you solved the challenge. That is the really cool thing. You solved the challenges 10 years ago that lots of retailers have today.
Yeah.
Looking forward. I think all the big companies like SAP, Salesforce, IBM knocking at your door saying use our software doesn't make any sense from you what you have described, because they're not solving your problem. But maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the future outlook. So the one thing is like optimizing the existing infrastructure,
Sure.
get rid of the latest legacy, and there will be like an even faster change in the future, because like what is built today is probably heavy legacy in 3 years from now already. So there must be some organizational changes that address this kind of issues. But is there anything like big stuff coming where you say, okay, that's where part of the engineering team is really working on, where you're keen to learn if this kind of is working or not? Because obviously the website is working, mobile environment is working. I saw some Dell apps in the App Store, but I think it's kind of monitoring apps, for example, for infrastructure, for example. Though, is there something, especially when it comes to selling more to B2C or B2B, that you're working on, which is not like desktop and mobile oriented?
Yeah, so some of the things that you would see the larger organization is working on is there is a pretty big shift from buying infrastructure outright to buying infrastructure as a service, right? And so what the big companies are realizing is that public cloud is not the answer to everything.
True.
It's all hybrid and private cloud. So one of the biggest things that
as you say, cloud only means the computer is anywhere else. Yes.
Yeah. So one of the big shifts we are making from an e-commerce standpoint and the overall business standpoint that we are enabling, which our teams are working diligently on and we are excited about, is that we see cloud as an operating model and not as a destination. It means that you can actually, manage your data center like a cloud in an OpEx-driven model. And one of the biggest things we are working on, and you can go to DELL Technologies on demand. You can Google it, or you can check out DELL Technologies cloud console that we have that we are coming out with, which is really about letting our customers get infrastructure as a service. So you pay on a monthly basis. It still gets shipped to your data center, right?
Yeah.
But enabling that model from an e-commerce standpoint, it's a pretty big shift for us, right? Because
that's true, but that's what we are also seeing like in office equipment, right?
Yeah,
so it doesn't make sense to buy Latitude anymore, like or my X1 or so. It's much like from a company perspective, it's much better just to rent it and just get a new model when it's done, and you take care of refurbishment and like secondhand market or whatever.
Right. Yeah. And so changing our product data model, our billing model, our payment model, how we keep track of these things. We didn't have to worry about these things in the past because we were just selling things outright. And so that's one of the biggest things we are working on. We are very excited about. That's on the B2B front. On the B2C front, what we are really doing, and it's really cool, is that we have put more focus on human-centric design approach in the past few years than before. And what we realize is that there is no one better in the industry than the PC makers and server makers than anyone else who would be able to go out and understand exactly how people make buying decisions on these products. Just like Airbnb went and figured out what's the best way people would like to pick the right place to stay at. Uber figured that out for travel. We really are on the mission to be the best place for people to figure out the right infrastructure needs. And a great example I would give you where we use human-centered design-driven approach, and it worked really well, and now we are expanding it across the board from a B2C standpoint, is in the past we used to use data and customer verbatim to make decisions on what kind of hypothesis we can build and what kind of experiences we need to go and A/B test and do usability testing on. And what used to happen was our hypotheses were so much data-driven that we never got a chance to go and ask customers if they had a moonshot approach to this, if there were no limitations, how would you go about it? I use the BlackBerry versus iPhone approach, right? Apple would have never been able to come up with iPhone had they just looked at BlackBerry and say, what I can improve in BlackBerry. So a good example I would give you is that gaming. So we always had, gaming machines that we sold on our website, and we continued adding more features, immersive experience and showing people how great our products are and how cool they look and how much power they have. But when we actually met with the gamers in person, at a gaming conference and did not actually show them any hypothesis that we had with our preconceived notion. And we said, hey, if you had no restrictions, if you had a website that would let you, find the right gaming machine for you, how would you go about it? And what they told us was that I would like to start from a game. We only play, very specific set of games. And no one in the industry is able to tell us right now, if I pick a game, no one can tell us which machine would have the right frame per second for that game.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah.
And oh, wow.
But you wouldn't understand if you don't play games, right? It's true.
So like, okay, that's interesting. We were not in the business of selling a ton of games, but we said, okay, so now we need to test an experience where you can select, from 10 of the games first, and then we need frame per second for each game benchmarked. Well, that's a pretty big mission, right? That's a lot. So we did a small test where we took like 2 of our Alienware machines, and we actually worked with a third party and benchmarked frame per second for like 10 games. And we scrapped together this experience very quickly where you can go and pick Warcraft or you can pick Fortnite, and then it will tell you exactly what the frame per second was for that game for that machine. And boom, our conversion was off the roof from something we had never seen, and we actually had spent less time than we had spent in the past building new features and functionalities. And then we expanded and we signed the contract to now to do benchmarking for all the gaming machines for like all top games. And now we can go to Dell.com/gaming, and the way you shop for gaming machines is now completely different. So my final point is that we need to do a lot more of this from a B2C standpoint.
That's true. And the interesting thing, you're still selling the same stuff at the same price. It's only a different buying experience. It's a very interesting.
And it's not filter driven. It's not filter driven, right? It's truly based on the need of that customer.
You filter by games, yes. But
so how do I expand this to rest of the personas? So, for example, we tried this with demographics where they did not know much about laptops and desktops, but they needed one, and they told us that, hey, I would like something where I can tell you what I have today, and you tell me what is something similar or better. So we let them put like free-form text, and they would put like Apple, MacBook, XYZ, HP, and V, and we ran some, initially we did some, manual mapping, and then we slowly built, ML algorithms, and if you're a grandma, somebody you don't know anything about machines, you can just now put in Apple, MacBook, XYZ, show me the best Dell that is close to this or better. So that's what, not just, the infrastructure and PC industry. I would say that if you're a retailer, if you are, a spatial products manufacturer, start thinking about how you can use human-centric design. Stop going to your customers with, do you like A or B? Put a whiteboard in front of your customers and ask them if they had to shop for what you are selling, how they go about it if they did not have anything in front of them. That's what I would recommend.
That's very cool closing words. So I learned a lot here. Now I'm eager to exchange my my X1 laptop and search for on the Dell website, and let's see what I can see or what I can rent. I think that's like in 2 or 3 years nobody gonna buy anymore. It's only like we rent or lease a laptop anymore. I hope we can continue this conversation and record maybe a second session in 2021. Thank you for your time, for your for the kind of history class when it comes to IT challenges, and see you in the next episode.
It was an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for having me, Alex.
I hope you liked this episode. Please leave a review on iTunes or SoundCloud or Spotify. Recommend this podcast to some of your friends. You will hear more interesting episodes from the European market and from the US market in the next months. My co-hosts, Willem Blom and Lena Hackeler, are in mid of financing rounds in their companies, but they will hold a lot of new sessions with very interesting guests for the Womlex show later this year.